Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. Cheating fiancé raises the bar on cheating. It recently came to the surface that my now wife cheated on me years ago. It happened while we were together on a weekend away with some of our closest friends, soon after getting engaged. The person who she cheated with was at the time someone I would have considered to be a friend. He was not as close to the group as all the other 8 or 9 people we were with at the time, but on the surface, I would have referred to him as a friend. Even more, he just happens to also be the brother of one of my wife's best friends, who was also there this weekend. We went away with some of our closest friends. All of us were in our late 20s. We did this together pretty regularly. We had spent the day and early evening drinking and hanging out. Then a couple hours after we barbecued some dinner, a friend and I noticed we needed to get more supplies. I was going to run to the store with my sober friend driving. Just before we were about to leave, I was made aware my fiancé had gone to the store with the guy in question, seemingly sneaking off when there was no reason for being secretive, unless... I was told he was supposedly sober and okay to drive to the store, and she wanted cigarettes. Not a smoker, but when drunk in those days, she would imbibe on occasion. I remember suddenly being hit with the most uneasy wave of anxiety when I heard this. Not just because of the circumstances. It was a deep intuitive gut feeling. I've never been particularly insecure, jealous, or controlling type of person, though I'm sure that changed on some level after this. I tried calling her to make sure they got ice on top of whatever else they were going to grab. No answer. Tried his phone. No answer. Other friends also tried calling them to tell them to grab bags of ice. No answer. By then it was clear I wasn't the only one seeing a potential issue here. Uncomfortability was evident on her friends and my friends' faces after several attempts to call each of them failed. Everyone sort of slinked away. I'd imagine in response to knowing and observing what was going through my mind. The realization that I was not the only one connecting the dots here was unbearable. Some dots circumstantial, and some just driven by institution. I think he meant intuition. And too substantial to ignore. I remember calling her phone 20 to 30 more times and pacing like an effing weirdo on the side of the house we were staying at. Went from having a truly great time with my best friends to living in a bad dream with nothing to go off of beyond ignored phone calls, intuition, and the looks on a couple of our friends' faces when their calls were ignored also. She was gone for over an hour. The store is under 10 minutes away. Again, this happened years ago. I was recently made painfully aware that she did in fact cheat that night, which she confirmed by saying as much, but playing dumb on the details and floundering on the justifications for why those details are too foggy to be disclosed. While that says a lot about her character, or lack of, it seems fair to say I likely only empowered her commitment to deception by taking it and not walking away that night. I confronted her when she returned. He conveniently dropped her off and left to not have to face me or the rest of us after what they just did. Getting nowhere in the form of communication that night, I proceeded to retreat inside my mind and consume tremendous amounts of booze and THC, trying to make this nightmare feeling go away. I will never forget waking up the next morning, her lying next to me and realizing that wasn't a bad dream. Also thinking, if my suspicions are right, this woman is the world's most sociopathic whore ever, doing what I think she did and then sleeping in bed next to me the same night. I know even though I forced myself into denial, deep down I always knew some bad crap went down, but I turned it off in my mind, probably as a weak-ass defense mechanism. We had such a long and deep relationship at that point. 8 years, 6 living together, recently engaged. She slept next to me in bed hours later. I couldn't begin to wrap my head around the concept that she may be capable of doing something so unfathomable that I chose to convince myself that the reason it seemed so insanely incomprehensible and effed up must be because it was all in my head. Over time, convincing myself, I remembered and exaggerated versions of events for whatever reason. But in the immediate weeks after this, I kept approaching her about it over and over. I was told I'm wrong, crazy for even suggesting it, to a point where I was told I am a psycho for making such accusations. That was the narrative from the moment it happened, when she returned for betraying me so brazenly, until days ago when it came to the surface. She even brought it up when we were hanging with her friend and his sister in the context of, "Can you believe he thinks I would actually do something like that? Come on!" Using someone, his sister, as a pawn to hide her behavior from me and convince me I'm crazy is something I will never forget. She hid it from her friend until I found out for certain, if I was this friend, she would be dead to me. After this, he avoided me like the plague, and I convinced myself it was because he heard of my suspicions and him being innocent. He didn't want to get involved. He made comments to friends that he was terrified of me. Should have seen that for what it was, huh? Wonder why. Scum. Worth nothing. This guy was arrogant and a well-known womanizing narcissist. Even bragged about screwing prostitutes and having a very expensive coke habit. While sharing this will certainly only make me look even more unfathomably moronic for not running as far from her as I could that night. Even though I was here for it, it seems fictional when I write it down. This dirtbag even bragged to all of the guys when we were busting his balls hours before that he is in fact such a legit whore, that it's likely he is littered with STDs and or HIV from all the unprotected sex he had. This is the kicker. We jokingly shared his comment with my fiancé and his sister that very day, so she was well aware of what he said, yet made a choice to cheat on me with him. The details of how far it went are unclear. I'm told by her and another person he shared the story with, there was no sex. Yet, while it's safe to say I'm a moron, not moronic enough to let myself accept anything short of them having engaged in the most vile and degrading forms of unprotected sex. If she was capable of doing what she did, it would be insane to believe she wasn't capable of doing it all. This piece of human trash is one of those cliche D-bags that embodies the stereotype of an elitist misogynist who thinks his money makes him above all others around him. His financiers being slightly irrelevant in this context, as I did and do well for myself. Since I have been forced to face this, I can't rationalize how someone who could do something like this to their fiancé just days after saying yes, 7 years of living together, and be capable of moving forward into a marriage and still look me in the eye all this time, keeping this secret, not to mention God knows how many other vile secrets. Can't think of any grounds for justifying the concept that she isn't, wasn't, or won't be capable of being unfaithful at any point past, present, or future. My denial allowed her to brush it under the rug, and she lost no sleep from that. Terrifies me. If a fiancé can cheat while spending a weekend away with close friends, and do so in such a careless and reckless way that everyone there is uncomfortably forced to observe these red flags, don't know how to process this crap. I'm seeing now all the things I thought were a very strong-willed person were instead just the traits of someone who does whatever they want, whenever they want, with no concern for the impact on others. Especially when we were in our 20s, when drinking was involved. Anytime she did something I didn't think was okay, or even suspected something, not talking, just cheating related, she just denied it. And when denying wasn't working due to witnesses and collateral damage, just call me crazy, bury the memory until in some cases, she may have even convinced herself she didn't do any wrong. I have struggled with depression and battled with the impact of gaslighting for some time. Don't believe in the concept of being a victim. I believe in cause and effect. I didn't cause her to do this. That's all nature versus nurture. I also don't believe in focusing energy on things we can't control as individuals. Yet I do have some ways to control whether I allow myself to be exposed to a living nightmare like this again. Time for some words of encouragement from the community. First up, a simple question from Quote and Booby. Why did you marry her? Please RFNZ says, literally, you would have had all those people at your wedding, all knowing full well that the woman you were marrying had been railed on that trip. The sister of the douchebag undoubtedly had a seat at the head of the table with you guys, knowing 100% what her friend did with her brother. The brother not wanting to face you at all is the telling sign here. He knows what he did and had post-nut clarity. No one at that getaway would have been surprised if you'd called the whole thing off. You should have gone to the shop to get ice and said that you didn't see him or her there or on the road. Chances are, if you're remote, it would have been one road in and one out. Too late now to annul the marriage based on lies, if that was ever really possible. Hope you guys don't have kids now. If you do, test away, mate. Next up, They Call Me Mescar says, you sound very intelligent, and I'm sorry that you invested so much time into a relationship with someone like that. She is clearly low class and definitely not worthy of being with someone like you. You gotta leave her. People like her will continue with their ways, whether it's lying, using you. She is trash. I've been in a situation like yours before. It's awful knowing you have been backstabbed by people you thought you were close with, but at least now you know her true colors. One rule I always go by is that I never believe words, only actions, because of how many times I have been deceived. People will say anything to convince you to cover up a lie, but once you connect the dots and realize something is up, don't ignore a red flag. It's always a clear indication that something's up. Always trust your gut. Pataruzu12 says, now that I read the total narrative, you trashed the idiot that effed your wife. You trash your wife. She probably didn't stop that night. But what about you? What kind of a person are you that married a person like her knowing what you knew? The official cryptic responds, "What kind of person is he? I don't know, mate. Probably the one who was so traumatized by this entire sequence of events, he never wanted to confirm its existence because it'd probably kill him from inside. How the F are people questioning his character is beyond me." Queen Crown says, his character's being questioned because he knew she cheated. Had heard the guy saying he's probably riddled with STI and HIV and still married a woman that spent an hour away from him and their friends, never answered his calls, and never provided an explanation as to why that happened. He knew she cheated and chose to ignore that. Then he comes on here with his long essay looking for what? An attaboy? They were all so stupid. OP the most of all for allowing that crap. He called that guy so many names, but didn't call his then fiancée, now wife, any. She's a dirty you-know-what. There, did it for you.